All right, Professor, what's your favorite Daft Punk song?
That's the people with the helmets.
Okay.
Interstellar 555.
Okay, that's good. You know the name of that. Just name as many Daft Punk songs as you do know.
I just did.
That's not a song.
That's not a song. There's songs in it.
Yeah, there are, but that doesn't mean you can count all of the songs in it.
I've got a feeling that tonight.
Wait, actually?
Good night. I don't know.
That's not even close to what Daft Punk sounds like.
I wonder, are you thinking of Get Lucky?
Sure.
Well, okay, if you said, like that would be correct. Get
tonight,
Lucky would be correct.
Get Lucky. Ba-da-ba-da-bow. Ba-da-da-da-da-dow. Ba-da-ba-da-bow.
Excuse me.
Ba-da-ba-da-lucky.
Okay, so the McDonald's mashup of Get Lucky and Tonight is going to be a good night. By the Black Eyed Punks.
I have no idea where this will lead us, but I have a definite feeling it will be a place both wonderful and strange.
Hello, and welcome to the wonderful and strange Twin Peaks Logcast. I'm Kalil, and with me today is the Rancho Rosso logo to my sequel series promo.
Did I do good?
You did good. I right now am doing the imitation of a donut, visually. So who are you again?
I'm the Unplugged Professor.
What are we talking about today?
We are talking about more special features. In fact, the remaining special features that we have from the return, and also a bonus special feature that was technically in the original series from the Z-Tay collection.
Today's discussion includes behind-the-scenes, footage, cast interviews, and other stuff.
Now, we are going to likely talk about every single spoiler from the past 70-plus episodes.
This is a great one to start with.
This is an excellent one to begin with. We're glad to have you on our journey. If you do not have access to some of these materials traditionally, just note that we are only going to go into it somewhat,
right,
so that we can
allow
the experiences for people.
To go into it the entire way would be to make this a 12-hour pod.
Yes.
So we're not going to do all that. A lot of the joys in experiencing it for yourself. But also it's kind of nice about some of these features, depending on what they are, they might already be on YouTube.
They might be. Legally speaking, they might be.
Well, some of them are officially uploaded, like...
Some of them officially,
yeah,
but other ones that might not be officially, I would never search that.
Well, we're not endorsing it, obviously.
I'm a good boy, Showtime/CBS. I'm a real good boy.
You know who's a real good boy, but only like now, recently, and not in the past?
No?
Benjamin Horne.
Ben Horne's the good boy.
Yeah, he's reformed by the return, right?
Benjamin Horne is definitely fighting some urges that we never see the conclusion to,
yeah,
yes.
But like as far as we know,
he may have had a potential fling end up happening, but maybe not. Bethany says she's a good dude.
Bethany?
Beatrice?
I'm not going to help you.
Burmese.
So the Burmese python ignored the advances, I suppose. So Richard Beymer, the actor for Ben Horne, we've talked about before, is an interesting guy. He has always said some interesting anecdotes about his like trips with David Lynch and things that he's kind of done. His ayahuasca stuff from the previous special features of the original series. Mm-hmm. And we've talked before, I think, that he does photography. He does stuff with film. And we're getting to actually see some of the fruits of that with the Richard Beymer films on Disc 7. It opens up with a note from Richard Beymer that you can read. And in this, he mentions that before, he had made a film with David Lynch, and that was when Lynch was contemplating making a movie about the life and teachings of the founder of Transcendental Meditation. I apologize if I say this name incorrectly, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And obviously Lynch did not end up making that feature, but Beymer had shot kind of the whole behind the scenes of maybe what could have been a movie for that. Mm-hmm. And the last time that Lynch asked him to come along to a trip, to go on an adventure with him, he agreed, and Beymer again did not hesitate when Lynch asked him to film behind the scenes in the Red Room. Mm-hmm. So this is yet again more behind the scenes features, but this is exclusively at the Red Room. I don't know if Lynch himself wanted extra footage of the Red Room beyond the other people already recording things, Or, as my brain is kind of telling me, maybe Showtime wanted this. I don't know where it comes from that there's so many people with cameras during the returns behind the set doing this stuff.
I can't speak for the other behind-the-scenes areas, but from what I understood from the note, or the tone from the note, is that after being asked again with David Lynch being involved, he jumped on it. It sounds like something very personal. It sounds like something that if it was from a journey in the past and now with this offer coming up again, I see a very large likelihood the Richard Beymer one exists the way it does. But also, I'll say that the other tonally set behind the scenes areas were either David Lynch or David Lynch's compromise to the situation.
If you hear any rustling in the background, the professor's cat has the zoomies right now, just going around the table, just jumping over things, and
she's doing laps.
She's doing laps,
just like Richard
Beymer. Doing laps around the set of the Red Room, going in high places, going in low places, mostly on the ground.
Yeah, we're seeing more of the crew, if you will, during this time. And
not the acting crew, but like the supporting crew, the people working on props, the set, etc.
Yes, and though David Lynch is highlighted for a fair amount of the time, we still get to see like the small conversations that happen.
There were some fun interactions.
There's some great interactions.
Like clearly they recognize Richard Beymer in the hallways. They know who he is. They see him with the camera.
Especially the faces.
Yeah, they get to make funny faces at him. That's really charming. I liked that. And you get to see how busy the behind the crew people are, which, yes, you can probably figure they are, but actually seeing them there's a lot more people involved in Twin Peaks than just what we see on the screen when we watch it.
Not to mention you get a little bit of a close eye on the tech and just like how that is operated or how that looks like. Very much Twin Peaks The Return's special features. So there's so much in depth of the entire process of it that adding this on top of that,
this is unprecedented.
It was already unprecedented. Yeah. It just keeps on like climbing up that mountain, despite the fact that there's no cliffs left.
Just like that Price is Right game with the yodeler. This is the second
time. But the yodeler kept going.
Kept going. It does kept going, yes. And not only it keeps going through the film, but also seeing the scope and space of how far the sets keeps going. It's kind of cool. Seeing the interconnectedness that you could walk kind of from one area to the next. At one point, we see the very expansive version of the Red Room where they CG'd the horse on the floor that has to kind of like pan.
And the guy that has to pet the horse.
Petting the CG horse. They took pictures of the guy petting the CG horse. That was very fun. But yeah, how big that room is, I thought was really cool to see. We also get to see nearby, presumably, the set of the room that's full of like the wallpaper from, I would assume it's similar to be looking like this, the Fire Walk With Me painting. It's that floral pattern in the room with the woodsman and the television set, Mr. C, all that sort of stuff. That was really interesting to see because I don't think that had been previously featured in a special feature.
Not only that, but unless like they had certain equipment to capture the audio in a specific way, the sound is different.
Yeah, like, that electrical machine is so annoying. It is so loud.
Both are loud and annoying, but in different ways.
Yes.
So the fact that there's probably audio engineering going on with like additional sounds being dubbed over that, it's just a Marvel to sort of experience.
And speaking of Marvel, there's a lot of superheroes in the Marvel canon, one of which, of course, is the Jumping Man, very famous MCU character wearing the white mask and the red suit going up and down the stairs. Also in Twin Peaks. Did you know that?
Honestly, like, there's so many crossovers with Marvel at this point. Fortnite crosses over with Marvel. Santa Claus is technically a major Marvel character. I can't remember. Was Jesus Marvel or DC?
In Marvel, yes, both. There's a Jesus on both Marvel Wiki and DC Wiki. For what it's worth, I thought the Marvel Jesus sounded more interesting from what I read. But neither of them are in the movies. They're just in the comics. Yet. I'm waiting for the announcement.
Scene.
MCU, Jesus will return. Takes on multiple meanings depending on your faith.
All I know is that Quantumania, it takes place in a really small spot. So I imagine the after credit scene is like it's actually in Jesus's follicle, like one of his hairs, like either inside
like a Men in Black kind of ending.
Exactly.
So a man not in black in red is the Jumping Man, just cycling right back around.
Yes.
If you were looking for any Jumping Man clarity, since we were filming with the stairs and filming that painted room, I don't think we got it. I did not see anyone's face that looks like the face that was superimposed upon the Jumping Man. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there are a couple moments in The Return where we see the Jumping Man in the red suit with the white mask, and there appears to be a face superimposed over it that a lot of fans and even like the Twin Peaks Wiki have just kind of taken it on assumption that that is Grace Zabriskie's face. Because to many people, including myself, it just looks like her very, very obviously. But there's nowhere it's credited that I can find. I was thinking, okay, if we see Grace Zabriskie on the set of that part, and they like either shoot it or it's like implied, that would do a lot to give evidence. And you know, I talk a lot about how like, okay, well, just because things happen on set doesn't mean we have to take them for sure. But I will admit that if I saw Grace Zabriskie being filmed to have her face over the jumping man, that would confirm it. So I would be like, yep, okay, cool. Like, obviously that's it then. But we don't see that. We don't see the jumping man in any situation there.
Well, I agree. We don't see it. Is this sort of like a memento mori towards what could have been?
I guess my question for you is, you know, without having seen it in any of the features, now that we're done with all the features, we never get an answer to that one. Yeah. That's one of the things that could have been the most quickly answered just by seeing that get shot.
Absolutely.
Do you like that it's still a mystery you don't know the answer to? Or do you think, man, it would have been cool to know?
It's one of those cases where, like, I get positives on both ends.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if it's left as a mystery to ponder on, cool, because I think it can lead to some fun discussions. If it is something that is revealed through those special features, cool, because now we get to see, like, how that came to be, such as, like, Major Briggs' body from the previous special features.
We also see on set Sabrina S. Sutherland and Peter Deming, who we've seen previously. They're very active during the Red Room shootings. We get Kyle MacLachlan trying to get his tie on. I thought that was kind of a nice little moment because he refused to use the mirror. He said that's cheating. And I wonder, when I was kind of seeing parts like that, did Richard Bamer get final cut? Did David Lynch, or did like Showtime? Like, who's the editor when it comes to the footage? Because I like that Richard Bamer just hung around long enough for Kyle MacLachlan to put this tie on and kind of struggle with it for a little bit. Mm-hmm. I like to think Richard Bamer looking over his footage was like, that's a good moment. But I don't know who chose what gets kept.
Another mystery
between all these parts. So it is split up between two different sections. The first one is behind the red curtain, and then it goes into I Had Bad Milk in Dehradun. And I don't really think there's a huge like tonal difference between the two. It's just different set moments, like different shooting times. Nothing really major. In the second one, though, there's a part with numerology with David Lynch that I think really puts into perspective that he's not joking. Like, he's not really joking.
All up to this point, finally, this is the moment.
Look, I'm a skeptic, okay? So David Lynch is talking, and he says, you know, I'm going to do my David Lynch voice. Kale. All right.
Okay, now you announce your lunch.
Just because I'm a vegetarian doesn't mean I'll eat kale. Okay. Quote, I got up at 6:37. That's a good time. 6:37. 6 and 3 is a 9, and 7 is a 16. 1 and 6 is a 7. So they got to add up to 7, my numbers. Like yesterday, I got up at 5:02, and it's a 7. And someone asked him, like, do you do this automatically? Like, just wake up? And he's like, no, I set it. Like, he sets it like an alarm, presumably. So just to recap, he got up at 6:37, presumably because 6 and 3 add up to 9, and with 7, that adds up to 16.
What? No, 6. Wait, what? 6 and
3 is a 9.
That's 9. Okay.
And then you add that to a 7, that's a 16.
Okay.
And then if you add 1 and 6 from the 16, that's a 7. So he's adding the numbers like, you know, normally. And then when you get to 16, you just add the 1 and the 6 from 16 to get to a 7. And he says they have to add up to a 7. That's what he plans. So the other day he got up at 5:02, so it added up to a 7. Because 5 and 0 is 5, and then 5 plus 2 is 7.
We're back to regular
and then
math
7
again.
Plus the nothing in front of it and nothing behind it is 7.
I agree. Nothing plus a number equals the number.
So whenever he's talking about, like, you know, the number of completion and all this sort of stuff in the return, this seems very clearly from David Lynch. There's a thing that he believes in. What does it mean for Twin Peaks? I don't know. Like, without knowing what David Lynch thinks it means, I don't know if it does much. Like, I still don't think, like, the 2, 3, 5, time and time again, like, the number stuff, it doesn't really do anything for me as a viewer.
Well, I'm happy it does something for him, and maybe this will allow other people who might wish to explore that numerology a chance to dig deeper. And
it's a gateway into that, for sure.
David Lynch's mindset.
It's probably uses numerology more than any show I've encountered.
The biggest numerology show I can think of is Sesame Street, but I think that that's for different reasons.
Different reasons. On Disc 7 as well are the behind-the-scenes photos in a gallery format. And this is similar to how there was a photo gallery from the original series, although that one had a lot of things that were, like, very different from things that we actually saw. And it would like repeat. How about there's like a bajillion photos of like Donna and Laura like on a picnic or something? I remember like, and then like at night shots and stuff on like when they were shooting at night and stuff. There weren't as many photos that I felt I had much to say on because we saw all this footage. Like some of the shots in the photo gallery are pictures taken of things we've already seen from the same camera, maybe even like from the same angles. So it's always fun hearing our PlayStation 4 strain and whir every time it changes photos. I enjoyed that process quite a lot.
There's like 3 photos where it didn't, and I was actually surprised. Like, oh, you got a whole package right there, didn't you? And there's
probably, if I had to pick one right now, probably my favorite special feature that we ran into is A Very Lovely Dream 1 Week in Twin Peaks.
Really?
Again on disc 7. I'm on a roll with that disc. I just thought it had an interesting kind of vibe, and some of the things that it showed I liked. So this was directed by Charles de Lazarica, and it opens with a slow motion shot, kind of black and white, camera on the ground. And it occasionally they'll do like some creative flourishes, like with slow motion or with black and white. I thought they're generally done quite well. And we get shots of like locations like Tweed's Cafe, a lot of dark ambient music kind of bringing in these shots, more slow motion of the water churning, these fading transitions. And as we're going through all of these different environments with the music in the background, you hear these different voices that are credited on screen of a lot of different actors. I was particularly happy to hear more Harry Goaz in here. That's the actor for Andy Brennan. He was quite a recurring presence on this particular special feature, but also you hear other people, like I think Michael Horse was in here a little bit, kind of talking over these different scenes and kind of giving their perspective.
And to add also a note alongside this, it's just their audio. There's no like facial features or
yes, they're credited on screen, but that is it. Yeah.
Yes, so you kind of like continue to sort of like gain the environment whilst these people are talking, and almost like a.
And I personally liked that more than the disembodied narrator of the 5-hour impressions feature because I know the cast members more, and I really like hearing their insights. That's just a personal preference. I realized, though, while watching that I think a big reason why I like this feature is that with the constant music playing, like when one track ends, it goes right into the next track, and like the whole 15 minutes there's music in the background. Music in the air, one might say. It reminded me a lot more of original Twin Peaks. That if you just watch this feature without really knowing the return, because everything is shot in the Twin Peaks scenes, like this 15-minute part is just Twin Peaks area footage. It makes it seem like the show is all about the Twin Peaks town. It's got the music always playing. You have Kyle MacLachlan describing Cooper as this older character now, but still having a boyish wonder and the same moral code. You know, as if Cooper wasn't in the return for 5 minutes. It describes him like that's the character we're coming back to, is Cooper, but older now, and, you know, a little bit changed, but also lots the same. And that's great, but it's so interesting because he's describing a character that's, of the ones he plays, like maybe 4th place. Maybe 3rd, if I'm, depending on your mood, how you feel about some things. So it's like, it's interesting hearing it, because if you just did this before watching the return, I think it would give you a very different idea of what the return is going to be like. And as someone who likes the original series, I quite liked that, combined with the very like positive and charming environment of the actors interacting with each other there. We also saw Mark Frost way more actively, like percent Mark Frost in this feature. He's more often shown. He was briefly in the Boehmer films, and he also was in the photo gallery earlier. So again, depending on what special feature you look at, you can go 8 hours with seeing him once, or you can go 15 minutes seeing him 3 times. It just depends on who's having the camera aimed where.
It's just surprising that we had I think it was about 3 or 4 features in the previous line of Twin Peaks material, yet nothing that really like talks to Mark Frost whatsoever. In the return.
I would love that. I would love to have like a Mark Frost, because that was actually some cool stuff in the original Twin Peaks interviewing stuff. We had like interviews with Mark Frost prominently, him talking about the series and kind of his experiences with it. That would have been really cool to have in this particular installment.
Well, too bad you have to go find Mark Frost yourself and get that interview for
I have not read Conversations with Mark Frost, but that is really what I think you'd recommend at that point. It is the book that was released.
That's exactly what I'm recommending, because that makes me sound smart.
Perfect. I also loved the close-up on some of the props. Like, you get to see the text on some signs, like on like things in the town or in the sheriff's department. There's like a coffee thing going on, an event in town.
Mm-hmm.
You'd never see them really watching the return. Maybe the camera's on them long enough for you to pause and like squint your eyes and see them, but it gets to highlight. It makes it feel like more of a lived-in environment, like scanning over Lucy's desk and things like that.
Yeah.
One of my favorite ones, though, I had to pause it on. I'm sure you paused it too. Is the Twin Peaks post. That there is a shot of a Twin Peaks post like prop newspaper, very similar in style to the Twin Peaks Gazette / post of the original that also kind of existed in the real world as a fanzine. And so what I could discern, it is volume 13, followed by a number that I think looks like an 8. And I want to believe it's an 8 because thematically 8's a pretty big number in the return.
Both numbers higher than how far the Gazette got.
Very true, and neither one add up to a 7. So there's 2 article titles we can see on the front page. One is Man Facing Murder Trial Receives New Attorney. And there's like a picture of a building that doesn't look anything like it belongs in Twin Peaks, so it's unclear like where this story is happening and who's the man, who's the new attorney. And I'm like, I could try to think, well, the man could be Bill Hastings.
Mike. Mike is the man.
Snake?
Snake is the man. Was it Snake?
It was Snake.
Yeah, Snake is the man. Of course, one was Mike.
No, I mean, he is Mike.
Mike is Snake.
One and the
Snake
same.
is Mike.
Not to be confused with
Who
Philip Gerard,
is the man,
who is
though?
no longer Mike in the return.
That's the man.
Yes, and Mike is in the return, but unnamed at the place talking to Stephen.
Multiple men.
So I think maybe the best headcanon you could do is that the man-facing murder trial could be Bill Hastings, but that's a guess that could be the case. The other article title is Classic Cooking for the Season. And, of course, you have to try to read the words of the article, right? Did you, Professor, try to read those words?
No.
Why didn't you? I thought for sure you would latch onto this opportunity, this succulent morsel being presented to you in the form of paper print.
When I've seen so much of the special features in a tangible amount of like things such as backgrounds, my brain mostly thought, oh, hey, that's neat, but then disregard the opportunity to dig deeper.
I regarded.
I did not.
So
there's so much on the surface level that I didn't decide to go deeper.
I will say I feel rewarded. So most of the text is really hard to read. It's kind of blurry and it's a lot of print. But what I could read, I copied and pasted into Google and found that it is entirely the text from the beginning of Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations. Just plopped into the article.
Is that the recipe for the Wealth of Nations?
Yeah, so just the Wealth of Nations is there for the cooking article. Presumably that's what it connects to.
What is the Wealth of Nations made out of?
Food, apparently. So I thought that was interesting that was what they decided. They didn't do lorem ipsum. They just went for that. That was really cool to see. Again, it means absolutely nothing. I'm not even sure if you ever see that paper on the screen in the return.
It means the world to somebody. Somebody put that together.
It means the world, the nations. So I would hope it means the world to them. Speaking of, I mentioned the good vibe earlier. There's a part where I can't remember who it was that was saying it off screen, but someone said that recording it was such a good vibe. And then what's on the screen when someone says that, though, is the bloody face of that woman that was assaulted by Richard Horn.
Yeah.
Like emerging out of the bushes. So just the combo of like, yeah, working on the set was just such a good vibe. And then just the bloody face juxtaposing on screen. I like little edits like that.
Yeah, cute little edits.
They didn't have to time that with that the way they did, but they certainly chose to. Kimmy Robertson got to narrate with Harry Goaz, again, the Andy actor, and that had some good commentary. Goaz talked about how David Lynch, in his mind, is an artist first and a filmmaker second. Something you and I have talked about before as well, that sort of filmmaking through the lens of being a painter.
Yep.
And then Kimmy Robertson kind of carries that on in her own way with her sense of humor and says that they get to be paint. And she adds that once she wrote a poem to David Lynch saying she'd wait another 25 years just to be the color blue. And she starts talking about how working with Lynch, she noticed he works in an energy field, and that energy field is known as love.
What a phrase.
It's just really cute and wholesome.
Cute. It is very cute and wholesome across the board. And there's no denial on that. It's relieving to hear that there's also other people who are on the cast that also kind of see somewhat of fun light to that.
Mm-hmm. So I think if someone's like listening to all this and they want to check out some of the special features, but you don't want to sit through like 8 hours of mostly unedited just footage, this is probably the one I'd recommend because it's 15 minutes. It's very concisely edited. It never really has a dull moment. It's just fun. There's another moment here where the first assistant director, Scott Cameron, is holding the Johnny like bear thing that was made for the return. And he's just like looking at it and talking and saying, David, I'm sorry I said anything disparaging about the space monster. It's just the creepiest creature I've ever seen. So his wording of calling it a space monster, I never would have thought of space monster to describe that thing. That was great. Some other things that we do learn some information in here that we hadn't heard other places. Harry Goaz says that the scene where Andy meets Mr. C, I think it's like part 17 when it happens, when Mr. C's walking up to Andy, that took 47 or 48 takes according to Goaz. And that seems wild because a lot of the special features up to this point, we don't see many retakes.
No.
I mean, there's some where it was like the Spike struggling to show the violence, maybe with the Bud Light popping out of the beer that was the chest. And by beer, I mean blood. Yes. So there's that. But otherwise, we didn't really see a lot of the retake process. Not that I wanted to see 40 retakes, just straight after the other. I just think it's interesting because you could walk away with the impression, even just after how much we've watched prior, that a lot of scenes were just probably done in one take. Just perfect right away.
No, there is one special feature, and I can't remember if it was this one or another one, where like Michael Cera.
That's this one. That's this one.
That also, to juxtapose that, is that Michael Cera's ready and thinks to himself, like, this is going to be like 10 takes, like he's getting himself ready, he's getting himself...
Pretty normal amount to maybe expect.
Yeah, just like get himself hyped and ready. And he does the line read, and he's got cut around lines of like perfect, and that's where...
Just do one more. Just do one more just to be
almost like
safe.
David Lynch had to be convinced for that one more. And Michael Cera is just kind of like riding on a high for that, because of course, like a one and done for something you're nervous about, like that's great.
It was cute also that Harry Goaz said that from what he understood, David Lynch was like really excited to work with Michael Cera. So like there's apparently like this sense of kind of togetherness. I was reading an article recently that was talking about how Michael Cera got cast. So apparently the story is that he had been doing meditation with David Lynch, and David Lynch did bring him aboard. Okay. So this is not, as far as I know, a Joanna Ray like original. As far as I know, this is like David Lynch wanted this person after meditating.
David Lynch just continually adopting people into his acting circle.
Yeah, it's just very funny. He knew what he was doing, I think, with Michael Cera. And if you're wondering on the back of Wally's jacket what is on it, because I don't think we ever see that. Maybe during the hug you get to get a glimpse, I don't know. But on the back of Wally Brando's jacket is a big skull. Of course, that resonates with the character and personality of Wally.
Yes.
And above that, the letters BRCM, which we don't have to explain because I think everyone knows what the B, R, and C and M stand for. We don't have to explain it.
We don't have to whatsoever.
So that's all the behind the scenes content. We are finally done with that. All of that. If you had to pick like your favorite behind the scenes, I know I've said mine. What would you say your favorite behind the scenes content was of all this so far?
I would probably go for the impossibly long feature that we did on the last podcast.
The 8 hour?
Yes.
Just because it's so thorough?
It's very, very, very thorough.
I can respect that. I a lot.
I respect it too, because
I just like how the option, if you want to go in between, like, you don't want to do as little as 15 minutes, but you don't want to do as much as 8 hours. It's like, fine, 5. We'll meet in the middle. And it's like, that's the middle option.
That's the middle?
I mean, I guess the Boehmer films, but that's only if you want to see the Red Room, I suppose. And that's like an hour, I think, when you had those two up.
Whoever wants to see the Red Room? No one.
I don't know. And likely, to kind of segue, a reason that Harry Goaz and Kimmy Robertson are featured so prominently in that 1 15-minute behind the scenes, I'm guessing that maybe some of that audio could have been taken out of the next feature, if not, taken from that, like maybe inspired by that. And that's On the Couch with Kimmy and Harry.
Yes.
So we get like 7 minutes of Lucy and Andy's actors like just kind of hanging out, giving cozy vibes. It's kind of having a good time. And it's fun. The only real like 2 notes I had on here, one is about them talking about how the cast and crew were like a family, and they like it whenever young people come into the world and come into the show and like I think it was Harry Goaz saying like he likes it when young people come into the series for the first time and they tell them what Twin Peaks means, like inviting new people. That's cool. And then the second thing is that the story that Kimmy Robertson was going on about, that she had been in the North Bend, Snoqualmie area like in the 70s.
Yeah.
And her sister took her there because apparently Kimmy Robertson knows a thing or two about energy. And that kind of lines up with what she said about David Lynch having the energy of love, I think, right? And she went to the North Bend, Snoqualmie area, assuming especially the Snoqualmie area. And she said she had no idea what the energy was going on. When she visited there, it just didn't make sense what was going on with the energy, which I just think is so interesting. And I don't know, like it's just funny little anecdotes. They seem like really cool people behind the scenes.
They seem pretty chill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also liked Harry Goaz's beard that he grew out. You know, it's cool seeing that.
Apparently, also had a ponytail that had to be chopped. Goodbye.
I think
no,
I can
Andy
see the
with
beard.
The ponytail is too far.
The beard with the ponytail, it's a good combo. I think for him, it suits him very nicely.
He does well with it.
Yeah. If you also like the format of two people talking, but you're thinking, 7 minutes? How about an hour and a half? And you're thinking, I like Andy and Lucy, but what about Dale Cooper and Laura Palmer? Then, completely unrelated to this, we're going to be talking about a talk with Kyle MacLachlan and Cheryl Lee on Disc 10.
Yay!
Yay! This is a great interview. I have very few qualms. It's well done, but I will admit that this was at the end for me of my viewing. This was on the final disc, and I was a bit burned out of all these special features. I finished it just fine, but I don't know if I got everything from it, and that's okay, because if I miss something, you can check it out too. Like, it's worth checking out, experiencing, because from what they accounted for, this is the first time they remembered ever being interviewed together for Twin Peaks, which is kind of wild as the two biggest names in Twin Peaks, Dale Cooper and Laura Palmer.
Yeah.
But they're interviewed together. They get asked some questions about the whole series, just kind of the whole gamut of things, and there's some good stuff in there. For example, the interviewer talks about the rock throwing scene and says that it was kind of spontaneous. And then she's the one, I think, that brings up this factoid that David Lynch had met the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
And he decided from meeting the Dalai Lama, he wanted Tibet to be in Twin Peaks. And Kyle MacLachlan says, I didn't know that. So, I don't know what the source is for what she said. I don't remember if we ever ran into that in any of our prior research to things.
Laura is the source. She is the source. No, I can imagine like conversation get around.
Yeah, I can imagine it's true.
It's just humorous to unless he'd forgotten about it. If this is true that like Kyle MacLachlan has like not heard any of this.
And I wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't told, because David Lynch just suddenly gave him the ideas. And also, like, David Lynch wasn't always the one making the episodes and being involved in the process directly. So other writers just kind of were like, okay, he just gave a directive.
He gave a directive, but I do think that David Lynch, when he is around, he tries to be involved as possible.
He's definitely very hands-on.
From what they have been saying.
Hands-on, but not explanatory.
Not explanatory. He directs every motion, every move, however.
Yes.
It's something that he is very thorough inside of his work, especially whenever it came to, I think it was Jim Belushi that was the example used. Where Jim Belushi's character was trying to ad-lib into a scene that goes through, and then David Lynch goes like, Jim Belushi, do I have to bring you to the principal's office?
So that's from a later feature.
It is from a later feature.
And I'm cool talking about it right now. That's from the Comic-Con panel, I believe.
Yes.
And so that I wanted to talk about, I think it actually ties into this anyway, is that we get all these different kind of accounts. Some we see, some we hear of Twin Peaks having so much spontaneous content. Depending on what book you read or what website you look at or IMDb trivia, whatever, you'll read or hear that some scenes were only the way they were because the actors had something just spontaneous or they brought something to the set. And I think a lot of them are true. But it makes you wonder if all of them are true and if different writers and different directors were more open to it. Or again, like you said, people change. 25 years, was David Lynch more open to it then than he is now? It makes you wonder, because it seems like when Jim Belushi ad-libbed, we don't know what he said. Maybe his line sucked. Maybe he added a really silly thing. But I don't know. When we watch The Return, I don't know if in the 13 hours of mostly unedited footage that we saw, did we see a lot of actors come up with things that got worked into the script?
As far as I'm concerned, here's what I'm heading into in this. And this, I'm using the quote from them to sort of guide my perspective. David directs every motion, every move. Even though there are all sorts of examples of people going freely into a moment, and exploring that moment and coming out with these improv-based areas. David Lynch has the final say and final cut, and I think he's just very particular with everything. If it's something that, like, surprises him, and from how David Lynch is described through the features to be someone that can see it like an opportunity to sort of like twist and play around with it, I think it's whether or not he feels like this is a good splotch, good mold, good piece onto the canvas, and then works off of that to make something larger, as opposed to just being very free-form or free-flowing.
It's just,
he's
sounds,
particular more than anything.
Yeah, if the way I've read it described is true, it sounds like there was less improvisation in the return than the original, because I just keep hearing things about and scenes in the original series, or like costume choices or moments where the actors had ideas and they could bring them forward and they would get incorporated, and we just don't see it very much in the return. Maybe it's still happening, but it just doesn't happen the way that people seem to describe of the 2 seasons before.
I think it's just because David Lynch didn't have as much chance to be particular. I think that a lot of stories that come through, we also have other people that are sitting in the director's chair at the time. Big example is for Jean Reno, who ended up sort of like leaning into his character and accents, but the director wasn't as harsh or trying to pull onto that as, say, for example, David Lynch would be.
Yeah.
Harsh maybe even be like a harder word.
He wasn't drawing the hard line. The actor got the win.
Yes.
The one that always sticks in my mind is that supposedly in the original series, there's that part when Leland's dancing with the photo in the frame of Laura, and during that scene when Sarah Palmer tries to stop him, the glass ends up breaking and there's blood on the photo, and Leland smears the blood. I've read multiple accounts that say that that was not on purpose. It was a real cut originally, and that was the cut from Grace Zabriskie on accident.
Yeah.
But they just kept rolling with it because Ray Wise decided to smear the blood, which is one of the most like incredible ad-libs, especially when you consider that he did not know he was the killer at that time. Just the sense to do that, the sense to be like, yeah, he's going to rub the blood. The blood of Sarah Palmer, Judy on Laura, and then the mirroring that of the, scene with Sarah Palmer in the return smashing on the photo. I really like to believe that the thing that Jim Belushi ad-libbed, it wasn't actually a worded line. He also took out a framed photo of Laura Palmer, cut himself on it, and smeared the blood to his brother, and it just didn't make sense in the scene. Like the right idea, Jim, but I don't know if like this is the moment for that.
It sounds like a thing Jim Belushi would do.
Does it? Do you know that?
Do you know that?
Yes.
Oh.
I also know that, kind of talking about the production stuff, according to how Kyle MacLachlan remembers it, it had been a while later into season 2 since David Lynch had been around, and that once David Lynch started showing up later into season 2, he would start ripping pages out of the scripts and reworking them and basically tell the other directors or like writers or whatever, like, this is what we're shooting instead. And I don't know from how it was worded, like, I said other directors. The only episodes I think David Lynch directed toward the end was like maybe 1 or 2. So if he's doing it more than those 1 or 2 times, it is going to be telling other directors what to shoot, which, I mean, he is the creator of the show. I think he has some right to do that. Yeah. But it is interesting when I remember also comparing that with some of the behind the scenes stuff I was reading from The Essential Wrapped in Plastic by John Thorne, that there was already like a chaos on set when it comes to the sudden changes or someone trying to get approval for things from Lynch. So for him just to show up after not being around for a long time, and then rip pages out, even added another layer of confusion. But then, this is where I think it's so cool to hear different perspectives. That could sound chaotic and stressful, but Kyle MacLachlan treats it as a win. He says that, like, the cast was happy and empowered. That's the magic of Lynch, to just come in here and fix things. And especially if you thought season 2 wasn't going too great toward the end. If you thought that it wasn't in the right direction, it was losing momentum, you could easily paint Lynch as the hero here, swooping in when things were at its worst. When the world needed him most, he returned and, he did his thing, which is ripping out pages.
Yep, he ripped out pages and did a little dance. And other people danced in victory, I suppose. I can't recall, what was the reception to the season 2 finale for people?
Well, a lot of people, casual audience, had already been tuning out. Ratings were dropping. But then among the fan base, it was like, that's it, we're done. And a lot of people wanting to have the show continue. A lot of petitions, the people trying to save the Twin Peaks community, the Coop organization, if you will, other forces such as that.
Yes.
But I do think it left a very, very strong impression at an age where, unless you recorded it at home, there weren't any home copies available for the next many years. Like, you couldn't just go watch it again.
Yeah.
So if you saw that finale air and you never recorded it, you might be living with that for the next 10 years, never see it again. Very easily until DVD release later. And there were VHS releases, though. I do remember seeing that. I just don't know if every country had them, and etc.
Yeah.
It was obviously harder to get a hold of, regardless.
I get you.
I was really surprised to learn that the Kale nickname, I always assumed is a combination of Kyle and Dale Cooper. No, apparently that's not even from David Lynch originally.
Nope.
It's from Dino De Laurentiis, and the only reason that even happened is because the man could not pronounce Kyle. He said Kale. And as a result of that, David Lynch thought that was cool, so they just went along with that, which I just, all these years assuming that Kale and Dale, that was the reason why it exists, not even related.
You did not expect the De Laurentiis lurking in the background this whole time. This is why you can't trust any theories out there, folks. Not a single one, because there could be a De Laurentiis waiting.
Any
for
theory
you.
we've ever said in this podcast, chuck it in the fire. Chuck it in the fire. It's gone.
We've done so many hours of this podcast.
Wasted.
That you've listened to, all gone.
Not only have we wasted so much time, you've wasted so much time listening to these theories.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to you. Do you hear me? You specifically. No, not you. You.
I think either you can blame us or you can blame Dino De Laurentiis. Those are the two options.
You know what? Let's put on Dino.
Yeah! Woo! It's not us!
It's not us! Thanks, Dino.
One interesting moment in the interview was when the interviewer, I don't know if the name was ever said, and I looked at the wiki and couldn't find a name. She was trying to push this point about sexuality in Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
And bringing up that a lot of Laura's problems were sexual in nature. And that by contrast, Dale Cooper was kind of a symbol of celibacy. And it didn't seem like either of the actors really wanted to go along that sort of line of thinking. So when she asks about Dale Cooper, if part of his virtue is his celibacy, Kyle MacLachlan does say a yes, but it doesn't seem like he has much to say on it.
Yeah.
Of course, in my mind, when I hear that, flashing in my head is My Life, My Tapes, where he sleeps with at least 5 or 6 women. And then that's not to say I'm shaming him, but to say he's not a celibate. He is not this pure, virginal, no-sex guy. That's not a thing. He's very interested in women and sexuality in the book. So if you don't consider that canon, it's fine. But if you do consider it canon, that's a pretty glaring contradiction to that idea. But even if you just look at the show, right? If you just look at the show, is Kyle MacLachlan a symbol of celibacy? Okay, so he turns down the offer of sex from a high school student. To me, there's a lot of reasons that might be the case. You do that. Don't revolve around being a celibate. That's a wrong thing to do if you're an FBI agent or anyone really in that position. Mm-hmm. And also, along that note, he says he wants to. He just isn't going to, because that's not the right thing to do. And then he knows Annie for maybe, Twin Peaks time is weird, but she shows up very late. Maybe a few days. Then they're making out and dating on the river, and there is that kind of implied sexuality between them.
But then that's when the bad things start to happen, Kalil.
Yeah, sure. You could say David Lynch or the creators are punishing it, but it's not that Kyle MacLachlan isn't going to do the sex. I find that to be a curious angle. And then I really got to give props to Cheryl Lee. She did a great job of the interview overall, but really with this particular response, because the interviewer, pivots to talking to Cheryl Lee about Laura's sexuality and how it's a lot of her problems. And Cheryl Lee just right off the bat is like, yeah, Laura Palmer was a child and a victim of sexual assault. And as a result of that, you can't just talk about her sexuality compare it to adult like Cooper. That isn't what's going on. And she very quickly pivots the conversation away from how Laura's sexuality caused problems for her and how other people victimized her. Which is really good. I'm glad she did that.
Very solid. 10 out of 10 for her.
And Cheryl Lee also very correctly, I believe, praises David Lynch for, at the time when no one else was really wanting to talk about things like this, daring to actually uncover that through Fire Walk with Me. She also at one point does bring up the book, The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer, kind of talking about her experiences with that. So I think Cheryl Lee does a good job backing those other creators up who allowed Laura's voice to be heard and who really raised attention to things that happen. When asked what Twin Peaks stuff comes from Mark Frost, Kyle MacLachlan does give an answer that he believes some of the UFO stuff that happened later, he said came from Frost in his view, that Frost had maybe more of the long game and the arc in mind, and he kind of praised his strength in storytelling. Sheryl Lee added that more from her opinion, she's not 100% sure on this, she believes that more of the family dynamics came from Mark Frost as well. Those would line up really nicely with The Secret History of Twin Peaks, because that book is all about family genealogies and UFOs.
I think
so that seems accurate from what we can tell.
Yeah, seems like they pinned him down pretty well.
I would also say UFO, I'm curious how far that extends, because there isn't... How much UFO content is in Twin Peaks original or The Return depends on what you consider UFO. Yeah. I mean, the Major Briggs abduction, that seems UFO-y, you know?
UFO adjacent.
UFO adjacent. The Return, maybe the vortex in the sky with Gordon Cole that one time. But that's also like shown to be more of a woodsman thing. Are those aliens? Like, does that count? I would be curious, like, what all constitutes the UFO stuff in Kyle MacLachlan's mind, at least.
I mean, it's unidentified flying objects, so anything in the air, really. There is the lack of owls. There's like maybe one owl. That could be
that
the
one
alien.
time that Nadine threw that guy during the gymnastics stuff.
That's identifiable.
Oh, when he fell, we identified who he was.
Yeah, exactly.
That's very, very true. Very, very true. The next really interesting conversation to me was Sheryl Lee talking about Laura and how Dale Cooper was sort of a guardian angel, potentially. And she suggests this idea, and it makes total sense. I mean, I remember you, when we watched Fire Walk with me, you had some theories on Kyle MacLachlan being a guardian angel, right?
Oh, no, I do have theories onto it, and I do feel that he is the guardian angel. I think that... You want
to, like, what was your evidence? Because you had some evidence for that, just for those who may either not have listened to the Fire Walk with me episode, or it's been over a year, you know?
Not only is it, like, through The Return, we see thematic elements on Dale Cooper trying to be a protector up till the very end, focusing in towards Laura, and those moments, like, trying to look out for her, in those moments where the guardian angel disappeared from her, like, from the portrait and so on. But when we're actually in Fire Walk with Me, when she is seeking that little guardian angel, and when, like, everything comes to fall, she is then in the Red Room, looking upwards, seeing a guardian angel in this space, which is something we've never seen from the Red Room before.
Right.
Maybe the Red Room's different per person. We don't have any evidence towards that. However, when she's looking up and sees this angel, at that same time, Cooper is there with his hand on her shoulder as a means of support, in a way that is looking over her. He is actively standing during this time. So having that sort of like supporting physical figure that's been telling her not to take the ring, that is still there for her at the very end, it just seems thematically fitting that this protector figure is her guardian angel if we use the text from Fire Walk with Me.
And I think there's a lot you could continue to argue that it's being set up in other Twin Peaks material outside even Fire Walk with Me, that there's an ample amount of that. But when Kyle MacLachlan gets this question, or at least it's kind of phrased after what Sheryl Lee said, he sort of agrees, but it's the most he visually and audibly seems to struggle to answer a question in this hour-and-a-half feature. He's like, yeah, he is kind of a protector guardian, but there's more. And then he phrased that, he said, it's about restoring balance, which I feel like is a very particularly worded phrasing on his part. Because no one's talking about balance right now. We're talking about him being a guardian angel, and instead he switches it to say, yeah, it's about restoring balance. And then he goes on kind of to try to argue... I've already alluded to the Avatar earlier briefly in a more subtle way, actually.
I'm not subtle.
That's fine. And he compares Cooper's efforts to like save Laura or be the guardian angel to pushing a boulder up the hill. And then he's like, well, and then you get there, and we did not succeed. He says, we have to go back. Who knows what's going to happen? It's not resolved. Maybe that's the point. It's the constant struggle. I just like how he's being, asked a very simple, like, do you think Dale Cooper is Laura's guardian angel? And he's like, it's, in a way, but it's also about balance, and you're rolling a hill up a cliff, and then you get there, and things don't go right, but it's a work in progress. And it's like, I feel like in my interpretation of what's going on, I think he's interpreting the ending of The Return. I think he's bringing that in, right?
Yeah.
That's my reading. And whether it's something Lynch told him, because, if anyone's going to be told anything extra in the script, it's going to be Kyle MacLachlan.
Yeah.
Very few other actors are going to be privy, but he might be. So he's, looking at that either from what he knows that maybe we don't, or even just his own interpretation. Because a lot of people read the ending as, Kyle MacLachlan's character went too far. This wasn't good. Dale Cooper, White Knight syndrome, took it too far again.
I think like the way that he responds could be similarly like compared to someone that, say for example, the boss comes around and is like, say, were you the janitor on the second floor? He's like, well, you see,
we're all janitors in this building in a sense.
Our responsibilities are to clean, however.
Yeah, so it's kind of shady. It's kind of interesting. You could tell it made him squirm a little bit to kind of respond to that. And there's a lot of evidence that he's almost the opposite of a guardian angel as well, especially when you look at the Return, retroactively putting this kind of negative light into Cooper. A tweet was making the rounds among Twin Peaks tweeters recently. That it's from the user at Fate Colossal. And I think this is their original content, or else they are sharing it from someone else. Mm-hmm. But there's this really interesting clip. It's about a 40 seconds long, and it's taking the scene from the Return. I had to play audio there for a little bit, but it's the scene from the Return when we see a flashback of Laura by the bush outside her house with, I think, James on the motorcycle approaching. Mm-hmm. But what this person did is they took the footage back like 30 seconds before that moment that is the same in The Return as it is in Fire Walk With Me. They went about 30 seconds back in both material and overlapped them in a sense. So on the top screen, you see, okay, well, what was happening right before the part that overlapped with The Return? I'm probably explaining this not as well as seeing it for yourself. It's worth checking out. But the point is, if you've seen it or you haven't, that whether intentional or not, when Dale Cooper is about to go into the past and like maneuver with things, it has Dale Cooper's face right at the exact moment, or right around the exact moment that the angel is fading from the painting on Laura Palmer's wall. Does that mean the angel's fading because he's coming to town? He's not in the painting anymore. He's really there, and that's a good thing. Or is the angel fading because her hope is gone? Someone's about to go remove her possibility of the happy ending by taking her out of her timeline.
Questions and riddles and curiosities.
Questions in a world of who? Get it?
No.
Because Questions in the World of Blue by Julie Cruz. This is Questions in a World of Who?
Oh, I forgot the name of songs.
Who knows?
That was a pun that could have landed, and you did your best.
They talk about how The Return follows Fire Walk With Me more than season 2. Would you agree with that statement?
I think that the original series followed with Fire Walk With Me are more tonally connected than I can see from the leap. Like the bridges would be much like larger.
I mean, it's
trying to reach the Return.
The Return is so different. Like that's why I insist on not even calling it season 3, is because it doesn't feel like the same show to me. And it also doesn't feel like one-to-one with the Fire Walk With Me movie.
No.
It doesn't feel like any of the books. Even Mark Frost, it doesn't feel like. I think, if anything, the closest I would say is it's kind of like Inland Empire. But even as I say that, I'm like, not really. It's just dreary and confusing like Inland Empire. But otherwise, it's not like Inland Empire.
I think that what I would give forward is that take a music record, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You place that
Can it be Fleetwood Mac's Rumors?
No. So you place a record onto the record player, mostly because I don't know that one, and I don't know if this will work with it. And you put on the little, like, spindly dial, and you press play, okay? The record starts spinning. The first song is usually the main track that is advertising the album itself. Like, it's going to be the opener. It's going to be probably one of the most important songs for the album. And so that plays. That's Twin Peaks. It is the showrunner, is the front runner, is the thing that everyone sees and sees on the logo, and that's what we're getting at. Fire Walk With Me is when you start getting deeper into it, and there's some more emotional tracks going on that can hit harder and can be very, like, fulfilling for certain people that are able to grab out for their own ways. That's what I feel is Fire Walk With Me. It's much more of a deeper, like, very individual-esque emotional moment, as opposed towards a lot that might go on that might appeal to larger parties. Then after the album has gone over, but the record still spins, where like there's a skip beat but still is that blank sound, that's the Return. Where the Return is the resonant blank sound that ends after the music is all gone.
That's a really interesting analysis. What is the access guide?
It's the little pamphlet that comes with it. Like happy little pamphlet that shows the record tracks and so on, and
good.
small little snippets.
Good. Yeah, the more we dive into all this extremely serious Twin Peaks material, the more I like, the access guide's so fun. The access guide is so fun.
So many pancakes.
So that's a silly little thing. Amidst a lot of the, talk about the return that didn't quite yield full direct answers, as again we'd expect at this point.
Yeah.
There was an interesting comment that Kyle MacLachlan made, and you can read into it as much or little as you want.
Yeah.
Where he started to refer to his character in the end, ending scene of 18, as Cooper, but then he qualifies by saying he's kind of Cooper there. That is an interesting remark if you want to run with that. Because what exactly is going on in part 18? Is it Richard? Is it Cooper? Is it some amalgam of Mr. C and Cooper? Whatever you think that is. The fact that Kyle MacLachlan felt for a moment he had to clarify, not Cooper, but he's kind of Cooper there. That just seems especially suspicious to moi.
Now, with our table talk and an opportunity to sit down with these characters between Kyle MacLachlan and Cheryl Lee, two people that we know pair together quite well whenever considering Twin Peaks. One that I feel more emotionally resonant with has to deal with more between two worlds. This was a episode, or rather a portion of the special features that we skipped on in the past, as you had seen to it that it might be a little bit more spoilery for the things to come.
And I hadn't watched it. When we were looking at disc 10 of the original series Z-Day collection, I saw this that was in black and white. I looked at the ages of the actors. They looked like relatively close to when they were in the return. And they started answering things of what's Sarah Palmer doing 25 years later. And I'm like, okay, let's not do this one right now.
And with this considered, we do have a very specific and strange atmosphere to an interview process that I don't regularly see. What I don't regularly see dealing with David Lynch. What a brand new concept. What a strange thing to say. Everything else is normal. But in this respect, we have, technically, as David Lynch puts it, 6 people being interviewed. The actors and the characters of the Palmer household. That being Leland Palmer, played by Ray Wise, Grace Zabriskie playing Sarah Palmer, and followed by Laura Palmer being played by Cheryl Lee. And it starts off in a more, I would say, dull, but also ominous and fierce background, where each of the characters are giving a moment to themselves on where they are 25 years later.
Where their characters
mentally.
are.
Because
they are in that character when they're answering, and that's during the black and white first portion.
Starting off with the person who is alive still, and David Lynch goes off of each one of these individuals, and the way that they speak about them, it's in very broad tones, but it still is notable where Grace Zabriskie's character, Sarah Palmer, talks about a bit more of a loneliness, but she tries to get out, but there's still a lot of pain within her over this amount of time. There's Leland Palmer, who states forward a sense of not being sure where he is personally at, but he also recognizes that he loved his family, absolutely adored
It's being
his family.
phrased that he's been dead for 25 years, so it's not even clear who David Lynch is asking. Like, it's the spirit of it's like the spirit of Leland Palmer, but where that character is temporally, spatially, is very unclear.
And that disconnect is also continued into Laura's discussion, if you will, feeling that disconnect. And it comes to a point where eventually, after talking to these characters, they settle themselves down and continue a discussion at a more jovial pace. This is, by the way, the same area.
It goes from black and white to in color at that point you're talking, and now it's the actors.
Yes, it is then the actors who are speaking. There's much more levity in tone, but as I was about to say, this area was one special features location that we saw before with the slice of Lynch.
Was it really?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't recognize it.
It was the sort of like semi-bar, semi...
I thought it was a different restaurant. Okay.
Nope, it is fully the same restaurant. It looks exactly the same to me. If they found a secondary restaurant to find similar looking extras in the middle of this space to redo, then by all means, they managed to pull it off. A big old switcheroo in my brain.
Okay.
But no, this is where like tones would get a lot more lighter amongst them, and they're actually able to go deeper into their thankfulness as their performances have been with David Lynch over the years and what it means to be at this point. But the big meat and potatoes I would like to get with all of this is the fact that the tone of this sounds like, as they're watching a special feature of Where Is My Axe from the Firewalk
on YouTube, mind you, like
on YouTube,
not even it's not Blu-ray, it's just on YouTube.
Whether they're talking about the creative productions made with David Lynch and how they're discussing how it would be great for them all to work together in some degree, as Ray Wise is the one who mentions it, and it seems that the other individuals agree,
especially David Lynch,
of wanting to work together again. It seems like this is taking place somewhere between.
Well, they talk about the missing pieces obviously being released or being teased at this point.
Yes, which hasn't been released into that Tumblr end quite yet.
Even though something's on YouTube, maybe it's unlisted. I don't know.
Maybe it's unlisted, maybe. Who knows how David Lynch is handling this. But in any case, like, it's between somewhere of that
it's like 2015, 2014 maybe.
And likely the return situation where David Lynch is probably sort of like dabbling into this and getting people curious onto some of this. But it's not fully committed to say, like, myself and Mark Frost got everything in order finally. Thumbs up.
He's definitely not brushing off the idea of working together again on something, wink, wink. And maybe I said 2014, maybe 2015, maybe it's 2013, maybe it's 2012. I mean, it can't be too much earlier. And we've had a pretty good impression that David Lynch and Mark Frost had wanted to do this for a while. So I don't know if at this point it's certain that it's going to happen. I don't know if this is happening, probably before the tweet was sent out by Mark Frost and David Lynch that the gum we like is going to come back in style. I get the sense that if it's not confirmed, if they haven't talked to Showtime yet, they might already be talking to each other, maybe. Like, that's the feeling I get.
Potentially. It's still a very fun little snippet to look into. And mind you, it's a situation where if you are watching Twin Peaks, if you watch along with us, it's too late now. Like you
already know too much.
You already know too much. But I will say, as far as the Professor's End and Blessing goes, the exploration of a character in the future, though it does give some idea of like one character, that being Sarah Palmer in this case, I do think that if someone were to watch this special feature, it would just be a nice little sticky note, if not just a small teaser for things potentially to come, rather than it is anything spoilery or anything.
It depends
like
on your attitude toward teasers then. It's not going to necessarily be spoilery, but do you want to go into the return having a teaser of what Sarah Palmer's life is like? And also, by the way, quick note, David Lynch at one point says that Sheryl Lee has the stuff. Stuff confirmed.
Another person is confirmed to have the stuff.
There are two people.
At least two people minimum with things.
And Sheryl Lee says that, although the material was very dark, whenever it came to the unknowns of what's going to happen, she felt completely safe with David Lynch. That was someone who could kind of guide her through these very harrowing things. And that's, again, another strength to potentially David Lynch's relationship with his actors, in particular during tough scenes.
Yes.
Which Fire Walk With Me is only tough scenes for Sheryl Lee.
Absolutely.
And, tough scenes. You know what else? Other show on television has had tough scenes before?
This show, this podcast, but when you're playing it on YouTube through your Roku.
That's right, Lost on ABC circa 2000s. Made in part by J.J. Abrams, but also Damon Lindelof, who also worked on The Leftovers. And he is the moderator of the Comic-Con feature that is shown on the ZDA Collection on Disc 2. It's from 2017, and from what we can kind of gather, this Comic-Con panel was happening after the return had already started, after Part 8 for sure, because that gets referenced by one of the actors. And I think they say it's like they're doing an advanced screening of like 12, 13, or 14, so somewhere in the like teens. The return's been going on for a little while, but not done yet.
I like to think that like the advanced screening was so in advance, like episode 8 just came out, and they're showing
Part
episode
18.
14.
18. No, we're going straight to the end. Do not pass go. Do not collect 200 questions you're going to ask David Lynch. And I just want to say that the moderator, Damon Lindelof, did a really, really good job because he was rolling with whatever questions were asked by the audience, helping facilitate. And if something from the crowd maybe been a trickier question to answer, he was good at reshaping those questions and reworking them.
Yeah, nothing really seemed to faze him as far as these interactions went. It seems that he was pretty quick on the jump.
And gave some good personal anecdotes at the beginning for those who were interested in that type of thing as well. Which, again, if you're interested in Lost, maybe it's some backstory on one of the creators is kind of cool. Joining this panel was Don Murray, who is Bushnell Mullins, Matthew Lillard, which is Bill Hastings, Tim Roth, who is Hutch, Naomi Watts, and then a few of the returning cast members from the OG series, Everett McGill, James Marshall, Kimmy Robertson, Dana Ashbrook, and Kyle MacLachlan.
And there seems to be someone missing
the
from
person
this roster.
missing is Freddie's actor.
But
Freddie
someone
Sykes.
else a little bit more up the totem pole.
Okay, the owl.
Not literally on top of the totem pole.
Okay.
The person sitting on the totem pole.
Bob?
The one with the raised hair.
Bob did have the elevated hair in a way. It's gray. It's
That's not elevated. It's more
That's
flat
true.
than anything.
Okay. All right. Elevated hair.
Gray equals elevation now?
You gotta help me out. Who has really tall hair?
Rhymes with David Binch.
David Cinch?
Yes, that's correct. David Lynch.
Yay!
David Lynch was absent from this, but he did end up sending out what seems to be a nice little video in regards to Comic-Con. And it was a series of sounds and events and things that happened, and it added a levity, I think, to the whole entire convention, if you will. He probably saw it as a fun thing, and so he tried to do a fun thing. Kalil, what do you think about the fun thing?
I think David Lynch had fun.
I think David Lynch had fun, too. I think that it was very crazy, sloppy, and paced very weird to the point that I kind of sat down and was like, okay, that was a thing. But I think David Lynch had fun throughout it.
He was definitely trying. I mean, it's just the very light, unimportant comedy skit that goes through a variety of kind of slightly absurd situations, none of which feel like they go anywhere.
It was
just
inspired
quirky.
by the director of Dumbland.
That's a great way to put it. That is a great way to put that. And with regards to the actors that were present at the panel, I think the one that I most really identified with, the one who really resonated with my soul, was probably Tim Roth. I haven't really watched a lot of interviews with him, and he's not really a huge Twin Peaks featured person in any of these sort of features.
Yeah.
But he just seems to have such a good sense of humor. Yeah. And the entire time I'm watching him, he's just kind of snickering and seems kind of cynically watching the whole thing. I don't know how to even describe his body language. He's just kind of eyeing everything around him. He doesn't feel like he's casually just having a good time. He's more waiting like a snake about to pounce. But then occasionally he'll just crack a joke with someone offset. They giggle a little bit, and then he's just over there laughing 3 times as much at his own joke. I don't know. I vibed with it. I liked it a lot. He also kind of talked about his backstory, that it doesn't sound like he's much of a Twin Peaks guy so much as a David Lynch guy. That when he was playing way long ago Gregor Samsa in a performance of The Metamorphosis, he connected that experience to Eraserhead, which I think makes a lot of sense if you've read or seen in some capacity The Metamorphosis.
Yes.
Very Kafka-esque. And that led him into David Lynch's filmography, and he respects him a lot. Never got to meet the guy until obviously The Return happened. He just seemed really fun, and I'd be curious, what his experience was like on the panel versus everyone else if you caught him right afterward. What about you? Was there a particular cast member that really identified or resonated or was a blip on your radar?
There was plenty, but not as much of interest came to me as the individual known as Matthew Lillard, who was at it. Not only a new cast member alongside with Tim Roth,
right,
but also someone that had that very, I would say, unique energy coming in, because he seemed very excitable and happy
to be here is the energy I got out of it.
Happy to be here. 2 thumbs
Has
up,
no idea what's
smiling
going
for
on.
the selfie. Definitely was dragged up there after a little bit, but not unwillingly, just to help find him in a spot. No, jokes aside, he was someone that was very enthusiastic, but I think that that's just kind of the vibe that people sort of get attracted to him, and that's where you see some of the more eccentric roles that he gets put into, whether it is to the very silly ideas with Scream, and also Shaggy from the Scooby-Doo series, and
who is dead to him by now. He does not ever want to be Shaggy. He says he loves Shaggy, but he's sick of being Shaggy.
when one questioner came up forward asking him a little bit more of like a Shaggy situation, sort of like a Shaggy read.
Yeah, if you want to know about this Shaggy situation, it's 47 minutes in. The guy in the audience who asked it, I just think he had phenomenal energy. He helped like school Matthew Lillard on what order to watch Twin Peaks if he decides to go check it out, because Matthew Lillard said he'd never seen Twin Peaks, just like Tim Roth, but it just seemed like he exuded this idea of, I don't know what's going on, but ain't it great? Isn't this wonderful, guys? What's happening? That's what I got out of him.
Absolutely, and that's a point that I wanted to bring across as well. Like, this person has not really experienced Twin Peaks, and yet he was chosen for this role,
like Freddy.
and he's lined into, like Freddy.
Give us if the fireman, it was David Lynch, and instead of a green glove, it was Scooby diving.
Scooby diving.
The only thing I can imagine you enjoyed more than Matthew Lillard at the panel might be the reference to the show Cop Rock, which, of course, listeners, you are well aware, we had referenced at some point that I don't remember.
I'm the baby merchant. Tots are us. Not cops are us. They merchant the babies, not the cops.
Well, I hope the babies are in better shape than whatever you just did to that song you were singing. But no, we find out that Don Murray, the Bushnell Mullins actor, his son starred in Cop Rock, which, if you're wondering, starred, it means that he's one of like 11 people that was in most of the episodes?
Yep, one of 11 people, 10 or 11. Definitely inside of one of those points where it lasted for a full season and deserves a revive.
Yeah. So speaking of reviving, we should probably revive Dougie at some points, because it seems like in the return, people don't check on him. How's he doing?
Oh, Dougie's fine. Dougie's fine. Just look at the actress for Janie Lee.
Forget
Janie
Annie.
Lee.
The real question is, how's Dougie? Right? It's not Annie's old story. We're at Dougie now.
Yeah.
And when the cast were asked the Q&A questions by the audience, one of the audience questions, again, remember that these people are talking to them midway through the return. It's probably a common question among a lot of Twin Peaks fans.
Yeah.
Why are people not reacting to Dougie? Like, asking the cast, why do you think people are not reacting to Dougie more? He clearly needs help. And they generally don't give much of an answer. Like, the people who are kind of talking don't really do much with it. I think, like, this was the part when Kyle MacLachlan was talking about, like, if Naomi Watts had a Dougie hot take, and Naomi Watts just says, I think Dougie's hot. And then, like, no one really answers the question. So Kimmy Robertson, Lucy's actor, kind of nudges herself forth, and she's like, I have an answer. Raises her hand. I think she rose her hand or something. She had some energy to it. And then she was talking about how, quote, I think that it's very easy. If you ever meet any families who live, like, out in the suburbs, who have kids and work, it's very easy to slip through the cracks, and no one says a word for a month. And say no word for a month without anyone noticing.
And maybe that might be a case. Like, she's emphasizing that, like, people might fall through the cracks and so on, and being overlooked. But at that point, that's
There's a punchline. There's a punchline at the end, though.
Yes.
She says, and what wife wouldn't like that from a husband?
Yeah, besides that quirky...
Laugh track.
Besides that quirky... No. Besides that quirky idea at the end... It's something that, like, there could be a hyperbolic reading of Dougie in that respects of, like, slipping through the cracks. I can see the reading itself. It's just very hard to see when I'm very distracted by the sense of Dougie is not doing so good at every moment, at every time.
Yeah, it's a fun Q&A, but I don't think any answer was given that substantially revealed anything about the return.
Out of the two answers, no.
Well, I mean in general with the questions, most of them were like, how cast thought of certain things or what their experiences were. And that was cool. That's valuable. I just don't got much to say about it.
All of it is cool as a fun little like dialogue and just like a fun time to talk to these people and get some fun stories out of it. I have to ask though, Kalil, and maybe like this is like an elephant in the room or maybe I'm just the dunce here. I recognize Comic-Con is something in which like it goes into much more media than like just comics alone.
Right.
Like I recognize that. How many bits of media though gets into Comic-Con without even having like a comic variant? Like even like
I would imagine that's pretty common.
Even like whenever it comes to like sci-fi, like
wasn't the next thing they were announcing for the panel like some NBC show or something?
I don't know.
They announced it at the very end of the feature.
Maybe NBC like put up a block and that's what they do. Maybe NBC is one like major little like spot over there.
I don't know. I feel like I feel like I haven't, I don't keep up with Comic-Con, but I wouldn't be surprised because if Comic-Con has opened up beyond comics to being just quote-unquote nerd culture kind of idea, right? Twin Peaks very much is. Twin Peaks is part of that.
Yes.
The X-Files would be part of that, etc.
Yes.
And I don't think there's a comic requirement. You must be this comic book tall to ride this ride, as far as I know.
But who's
going to say no?
Comics.
Okay, but who's going to say no to the Twin Peaks?
No one's going to say no. I know that they're not going to say no, but it's still, I feel like there's just a very unique subsect
and of course, if we were to be
bubble in.
If we were to be reminded of the comic books, we would have heard about them in Twin Peaks Phenomenon from Disc 1. Because that goes through the history of Twin Peaks. Not the secret history of Twin Peaks, that's Mark Frost's book. But the actual history, and nowhere did they mention the comic book run. So it must not have happened.
How? Sure, it must not have happened. It's in what's rapid-fire pace that they went through.
Now, here's the thing, though. They also did, through that rapid-fire pace, they didn't mention, I don't think, any of the books, actually, to be honest. But here's the thing. If you're listening to this, and you're thinking, wow, I wish there was a resource that went through the history of Twin Peaks, but referenced all the books. Well, there's a channel on YouTube called Snake Eye Dreams that uploaded in mid-late February a video called A Starting Guide to Twin Peaks. If you want to check that one out, maybe share it around with some of your closest 500,000 friends, feel free. I will not charge you this one time to rep my video, to really just put it out there for the world.
Enjoy. I'm going to just unplug your plug right over there as
Thanks,
I'm the
professor
for that. We go into the most special feature of the special features. And I say that because every other special feature, I would say, had its unique vibe or sort of place amongst all other special features, doing something different and new in the return special features. We've been talking about that left and right.
One could say, yeah.
This is the editing style that I've been speaking about so much of what I expect and see out of other places. It's where, there's music in the background, there's quick, snappy cuts to different dialogues from different characters that are going on while multiple people are talking in suits.
It's a documentary style with interviews and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's again very much showing how it's a phenomenon, this Twin Peaks, in a 10-minute format that might be kind of like that little in-between wedge between programs on your E-network.
Yeah, it reminded me of a quicker form of what we saw in the original series special features, where it also went through the legacy of Twin Peaks. But that one went through Mark Frost quotes, and it was a lot bigger of a production from what I remember, just in terms of runtime, if nothing else.
Yeah.
But I really do appreciate some of the people featured in here, because they didn't just go and ask some of the cast and crew who worked on The Return. They did kind of go back and ask people from the fan community as well. So John Thorne, the co-creator of Wrapped in Plastic magazine through the 90s, huge figure in Twin Peaks fan community. Also the author of the Essential Wrapped in Plastic, which I mentioned earlier.
Yes.
He's featured in there. They have people who worked with Welcome to Twin Peaks, the website founder, the Twin Peaks Festival organizers. I think I even recognize them from an old special feature where they went to the Twin Peaks Festival. They look familiar. Mm-hmm. And they had people who worked even in a burlesque club, they were featured in there.
Yes.
So just tons of people from the fan community. We saw people who worked on other shows like Lost. They got interviewed to talk about the impact of the show on film and television in general. Mm-hmm. And then I was especially happy to see a season 2, I think season 2, maybe also season 1, but definitely season 2, director other than David Lynch featured, Leslie Linka Glotter.
You did, Leslie. We get to see you.
That's great, because a lot of special features don't really go into the other writers and directors that much.
No.
Not especially in the Return ones, because the Return is only David Lynch directing, so seeing someone from the good old days is just fun.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of surprised me, I never heard this before, I don't think at least, in any of the research I've been doing, one of the reasons that it was suggested that Twin Peaks went off the air is because the ratings dipped, in part, potentially, because of the advent of the Gulf War.
Now, listener, there's a few things we have to admit right now. For one,
I run a podcast. I'm sorry to have to tell you this. I'm sorry that I failed you in this way. I tried to stop myself from making a podcast, but I just kept uploading episodes.
And now we're going up all the way to 77 very soon.
And it's about a canceled TV show.
It's about a canceled TV show. And so you could call it completed. But In any case,
The number of completion, what does it mean?
absolutely nothing. Number 2 is the fact that we weren't so much present around the time of the Gulf War, nor were we TV executives around the time.
Or TV viewers, we were not existing.
To track any of the numbers or the issues that may have come through. I know that off-pod, Kalil, that you had your doubts that it might be able to affect it.
It's not my doubt. It's more the sense of like our lived experiences that we've lived through pretty consistent wars in the Middle East during our lifetime. And when we were younger, we know that we could turn to CNN or other networks to see footage of the Afghanistan war and developments of what was going on.
Yeah.
But hardly anyone I knew, even adults, really cared or paid attention to it.
Okay.
And it wasn't interrupting other programs very much. So outside of like a big breaking news story, it wasn't regularly going to interrupt other shows or disrupt them. I just find it interesting and curious. I've never heard anyone else bring this up in other research, as far as I remember. And I guess I don't know why the Gulf War would lower Twin Peaks' ratings and not other shows. Why is it only affecting them? I just don't quite get it.
My only example otherwise is that what shows were thriving around then.
Or maybe what day it was on was the day they just cut to live coverage.
That's why they kept jumping the episode days.
Yeah, it just feels kind of like a really out of left field reason, but maybe it is true. Maybe that it was actually like literally interrupting the show, or it really prevented people from talking about Twin Peaks or carrying it, because it's no longer a water cooler show if you're not talking about it at the water cooler. So maybe there is something to be said about it that I'm just undermining or underrepresenting. Not sure. Anyway, there were 2 questions statements. I'm going to turn them into questions from actors who are featured in the Twin Peaks phenomenon. The first one was Andy's actor, Harry Goes. He says that in the return, quote, dreams are more vivid this time, end quote. Do you agree?
No. I do not believe that these are more vivid. I think that they are wild. The reason that I'm having this sort of thought basis, now I do love the special effects and the explorations that the return offers. The ideas of we live inside of a dream is a fun one, but I think that the biggest thing that you can have with a dream, nightmare, whatever you have, is how much leans into the uncanny valley. How much leans into the things that are very familiar, but something is off by them. And by that standard, I give that more to Twin Peaks more than I do The Return.
Or like Fire Walk with Me,
or Fire Walk with Me, in the nightmare example. In fact, The Return is only in that uncanny valley inside of a dream function if you instead compare, other than our reality of dreams, more to Twin Peaks. If you are to make that a dream inside of a dream.
Yeah, I mean, there's more dream-based content directly of, like, someone asking who the dreamer is, and flashbacks to the 50s and stuff that could be interpreted as dreamy. But I think for me why it's maybe a no is that the original series had way more blurring the lines between dream and reality, where like maybe bringing up Audrey's kind of a double-edged sword because you can immediately fire back with the returns, Audrey. But the fact like she could be talking with Donna in a diner and then suddenly she hears the soundtrack of the show and starts dancing to it when no one else can hear it. How walking into the Chalfont Tremont situation just kind of happens to Donna and then just doesn't happen anymore to Donna. It feels like you just take the wrong step and all of a sudden something weird's going to happen to you. Whereas in The Return, I do think that the Red Room feels less mysterious, maybe through overexposure. And I feel like you only really see the Red Room weird stuff in concentrated areas where there's vortexes, either in the woods or at abandoned like trailer homes.
Yes.
Whereas I do feel like in the original, it was just around the corner. You never know when you're going to encounter something unnatural or supernatural. That felt more dreamy and mysterious to me.
Yeah, I think that it really does have to flow with certain tone. Like, usually within the dream, you cannot tell that you're outside the dream until you're broken into a form of reality, in which then you are certain of your reality outside from the dream.
That's a good point. And I think Fire Walk With Me is the one where that's even more seamless because Laura is kind of going between nightmares and reality and dreams all the time. Obviously, the painting is a pretty big example of that.
the lines are just far too blurred with The Return. And to an aesthetic effect, I think it gets bonus points for that. But for that vivid sort of sense of a dream, I gotta deduct points.
Well, you said it's blurred. I almost think it's like too crisp.
I think it's too blurred mostly just because a lot of the things that are functionally happening in reality between things such as popping out of the sockets and vomiting your cream corn is also met with the strange rumblings of standing on a platform or zooming about into places that we know about, but why would Cooper know about?
And that's where also I mentioned the music before with Audrey. It's not really a lot of soundtrack in The Return, so maybe that's also where part of my immediate feelings are, because literally Audrey's line, "Isn't it too dreamy?" needs music.
Yeah.
It needs that. And there are some great musical moments when it happens in Twin Peaks. I don't know. And I guess you could key in on the word vivid from Harry Goaz, that if we take the Red Room to be kind of a dreamlike environment outside of reality, it's vivid in the sense that it's maybe more, I don't even know what is way to put this. Like when it's happening, it slaps you in the face more. I don't know. That's where I'm kind of uncertain.
I feel that Major Briggs was pretty damn well slapped in the face when he dropped into his living room in an arrow suit.
That's actually, or in a green chair in a weird realm where there's like black and white shadow figures.
Yeah.
Yeah. Either way, no. Sorry. Thanks for playing, Harry Goaz. If it is your real name. No, I mean, a lot of respect if someone actually has that opinion.
Absolutely.
Feel free to let us know. You could tweet us at Snake Eye Dreams 1, as in one disagreement with you, sirs.
And one more time, just for the people who are in the back, in the forward, I don't know, just as a reminder, we're looking out for little inquiries, questioning.
You're running out of time.
Few episodes are left.
My child is sick. Honk, honk. And then you're the zombie child. You start throwing up all over the place in the car. Now, Bobby, what are you gonna do?
I'm not talking about zombie children or about how you're going to throw up in our cars. I'm talking more so about the fact you can submit your inquiries and questions for our final curtain call coming right up around the corner with whatever wonderful and strange questions you might have. We will also be accepting any...
We expect great things out of
you. But if you wish to either type it down, if you want to send out an audio of your voice, sending out a wonderful and strange question to myself and or the Kalil, you are free to.
You can email those, snakeeyedreams@gmail.com.
Or tweet at us at snakeeyedreams1, the numeral 1, as in...
One more time we said this again.
One more time.
Or YouTube comments. It's cool if you want to be anonymous. All that's fine. And if you want something to specifically answer because you're not sure what to ask us, question for you, audience member: what does it mean if Laura is the one?
Or if you want, you can send $10 to this guy in like Wisconsin to send you.
They don't have our address. I'm not giving them our address.
No, it's not us. It's this guy in Wisconsin to get a Wizard of Oz DVD.
But that's not going to get it to us. They're just going to own it.
They'll own it.
Okay, listener, a great way to participate in our podcast is go buy yourself something shady from this guy on YouTube from Wizard of Oz. Look, I hope you try to...
I'm sure he's very proud of it, and I'm sure he's very happy of his creation.
Just send him money.
There's no denial on it.
Send him money.
There's just you can find the spot, listener. Look for the Wizard of Oz stuff and find the guys selling DVDs for $10 to the comment section. We are not liable for what happens thereafter.
That's why I don't even want to say
rabbit hole out there.
Yeah, you're putting this out there. I'm not even going to say what we're talking about because I don't want to give them too much information. They might do it, so no. This is a personal thing you can just ignore. It's fine. Speaking of being out of our comfort zone by this situation, Christabel, the actor who plays Tammy, said, quote, "Prepare to be out of your comfort zone in the best possible way," referring to The Return. Do you feel that when you watch The Return, you were out of your comfort zone in the best possible way?
I think I'm in a different zone, less outside my comfort zone, but mostly just because, I've experienced media similar to this.
Such as...
there's challenging media out there that I know that you have shared with me some films that you've had on the Criterion collection.
Okay.
So it's something in which, I know that there's challenging works out there, and I've experienced emotionally challenging works and different works and just styles and varieties of directing. I know that there's more strange things out there than what David Lynch is packing. That being said, I also know that those who will be less experienced with such realms or who...
If you're just going in expecting more of Twin Peaks Season 1 and 2...
You will not get that.
Right.
You will not get that.
Now, this is where I would say I was out of my comfort zone, but not in the best possible way.
Yeah.
But that's highly subjective. I do think like what Christabel is describing is going to be accurate for a lot of people. And I think the people who end up loving The Return, that's going to be generally accurate.
Yes.
I don't think a lot of people are going to say The Return is cozy. Like, I just think that there's too many ominous vibes here.
Screw your Christmas logs. Play The Return in the background during the holidays.
18 hours, everything, 18 hours leading up to Santa Claus click-clack mooing on that roof. Which doesn't make sense either for the cows or the typing analogy I could be going for. Speaking of visuals and sounds that might leave you waiting in anticipation, like the click-clack mooing of Santa Claus, they include the series promos that were produced by David Lynch.
There's like 6, 7 of them.
There's like theoretically, but only 2 of them are distinct. The rest of the 5 of them blur in, and there's 4 of them actually.
Yes.
So Piano and Donut are like clearly the standouts. They're listed first. Then it's followed by Places, People, Albert, and In Cinema, which sound like very different things, right? No,
not.
Wrong. They're the same exact thing with like little changes to them. On those ones, they just kind of cut between Places and People. I thought with the ominous ambient music, and there's a very loud like shutter effect when it cuts.
It's just a sharp shutter. It's something
like a shutter or something like a fire being snuffed out. It's just very rapid.
It seems it would come out like a thriller sound.
And I thought, like, if I was going into The Return, I think I saw one of these before The Return aired. It builds hype because you don't know the context behind these images. It's going at this fast pace. It's really ominous with the music. I was really finding it to be evocative.
It's very much trying to lean into an intense atmosphere. I do truly believe that there is an intensity being communicated by showing quickly little portions of each individual characters through intense situations which they are looking onto something, and it seems like it's very, very, very important. And a lot of the scenes aren't.
No,
like a lot of the scenes,
they're not.
Okay, they're important for a larger sum, but not as what the commercials are trying to communicate.
And the show does not generally have that pace.
In fact, like there's only 2 things that have the correct pace for The Return, and that is going back to Piano and Donut.
So Piano is this beautiful shot of these tall trees in Washington, presumably. It's going through them, kind of gliding through them in an aerial sort of way. And then as that's happening, superimposed on that image is the late, great Angelo Badalamenti playing, I think it's Laura's theme, maybe it's Twin Peaks theme, on the piano, and it's just kind of rising through these emotions in the woods. It's simple. If you know Twin Peaks, it's going to bring you in, and it's great. Really good. And the only thing you could say was a false promise is that Angelo Badalamenti's music doesn't feature maybe as prominently in The Return as it does the original series, but it is true that his music will be there, and there will be trees. Jerry Horn knows that.
Donut is about David Lynch eating a donut.
And that's why those 2 are the best promo features.
They actually take their time. They're a little bit slower, but they also sort of like play into... Piano plays into something mystical, and whether or not you believe what I'm about to say or not, I don't really believe it, but mostly just because it infuriates me.
Okay.
Is that the last note of like this big crescendo moment of the song is cut off before the Showtime logo shows?
I didn't even notice it.
So
but you're also more musically inclined than I am. When it comes to audio, you would notice that more than I would.
It's something where like you're getting ready and hyped for that moment and it just doesn't appear, almost as if it's been snuffed away.
Right.
I just think that it got cut at a bad time, but maybe it's something more mystical and strange.
Yeah.
And then the
the final note you'll hear when you watch Twin Peaks: The Return.
And then the other scene is David Lynch eating a donut for much longer
Well,
than
no.
expect.
I have to correct you. Gordon Cole eating a donut.
What's the difference in the scene? How do you know it's Gordon Cole? How do you know it's Gordon Cole?
He's wearing an
David
FBI
Lynch in a suit.
He's wearing an FBI pin.
He could just be wearing his costume.
Oh,
it could be
we see it in The Return, though. We know.
He doesn't say, "Hello, my name is Gordon Cole."
But that scene is in The Return. It's Gordon Cole.
Is it in The Return?
Yeah.
I think this is like an emphasized moment.
I think this is the extended
there were
cut.
Other people around him, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, this is the extended cut.
Extended cut with him on his own?
Yes.
They just put him aside.
Yeah.
He's like, "Everyone, get out of the way. I need to prepare the promo." Ow.
I love to think it was that last minute. Like someone, kind of phones him in like, "Hi, this is Greg from Showtime. We're trying to put together the promos, and we noticed that we're short one. We got the one you sent over with piano, beautiful, really gorgeous. David, love what you produced there. We got the other ones, very good sense of energy and really building up the anticipation for the new series. We just need one more from you, David. Any particular requirements? No, we trust you as an artist, David. Excellent.
The look on Kalil's
Krista, hand me a donut.
Glaze, please.
Very similar to the shape of a donut is the shape of the letter O, as in the Rancho Rosa logo. And I think it's really funny and cool that they included all of these. You could just hit play all and get 2 minutes of, how would you describe the sounds you're going to be hearing? Is that better or worse than the very sharp electricity sounds of Mark Frost Productions from the original?
I think it's like the sound's even distorted in my brain because it just sounds like I'm
like a cat.
heavily pregnant cat.
Which, contrary to popular belief, the professor is. I'm fixing that with the clone. The clone's being fixed from this.
You had to find out somehow.
But I do think it's really funny that this was included, and it was completely unnecessary. I think it's funny. Yes, you have your finger up. You want to say something, Professor?
It's humorous, but I think it's very interesting personally myself, just because there are variations through it.
Yes.
It's something I did not
and
notice.
And you can read into them with your Reddit threads if you want. I definitely know people have tried. I don't know if it's succeeded anywhere.
Extra time was taken to differentiate the Rosa logo.
And I still like the original Electricity with Mark Frost Productions, the same being every time the same. I like that more. I mean, I nothing wrong with the logo. It's a fine logo. Wouldn't it be funny though if the original special features had a thing where you can play all the outro Mark Frost Productions ones, and it's the same one every single time, but it does it 28. Frost. Yeah, Lynch Frost. It does it 28 times. Like 28 times. How would you feel? I think it'd be great. It'd be really funny.
I think it's that sort of chaotic energy we need more in special features.
Yes. I never really read much into the Rancho Rosa stuff. Like I said, some people have kind of speculated. In the show, in the return, there is a Rancho Rosa estates that are in the Las Vegas area. Mm-hmm. You could start to speculate why that's there, how important it is. The photo kind of has like a weird photoshopped kind of weird feeling to it, I think, that some of the imagery, digital photo imagery, like not as bad as the Wally Brando photo near Lucy, but it's definitely got some weird vibes you could try to read. Yeah. But I don't really think it's anything. I think Rancho Rosa Estates is just a name reference, an Easter egg, if you will, and maybe reinforcing that feeling, even if it's not proven, is what Mark Frost said in a Reddit Q&A when he revealed that the name Rancho Rosa, where it came from, that someone asked, he said, quote, "It's a private Easter egg. That's it." And it was referencing one of his favorite films from he says, 1970s. Then, after he said it's a movie from the 1970s, Reddit user Run DNA, which I think is a good name, Run DNA says, quote, "I'm guessing it's the 1981 film True Confessions, starring Robert De Niro and Robert Duvall, which features a housing development called Rancho Rosa." That seems likely the case. I mean, it's the same kind of thing. But that means that the film from 1981, he was saying it's from the 70s, which, of course, got a reply in the same Reddit thread, typical of Mark Frost to mess with the timeline. But,
we're going to go into the final dossier after this.
Speaking of there were some drums being played in some songs at the Roadhouse, one of which was not Hudson Mohawk's Human, because that's on a keyboard.
That's drums. A keyboard. That is anyway, what's the phrase? EDM, if I'm not mistaken?
EDM, yeah. But basically on Disc 10, they include all of the Roadhouse concert performances. You can just hit play all, and it's just like a one-person private concert in your home theater of all the Roadhouse songs, uncut, presumably. I didn't go through all of them, but I would assume that all the ones that were playing in the background while people were talking at their seats, those are probably no longer cut away from anymore. So that's really cool that you could just do that.
Genuinely, it's a great resource, especially for those who enjoyed those styles and performances, to just have those on their own.
Yeah.
It's the perfect slot to put into a special feature.
Yeah, and I mentioned Hudson Mohawk's song Human because that's one that was partially cut from the return.
Yes.
It played for a bit, then it went to, in part 9, Ella and Chloe, our favorite return characters. We love Ella and Chloe, talking about one of them losing her job from being high or something nobody cares about. And as that's going on, it then transitions later to Au revoir Simone playing A Violent Yet Flammable World, or Flammable, excuse me. It's not flammable, it's flammable for some reason. You know when there's too much flam?
It accomplishes the same
when there's too much flam.
Flames.
Yeah, exactly.
Fly,
fantasy flan. Anyway, so it kind of got the bad end of the deal by being cut. So if you want to see the full performance, it is there.
Okay. I will.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. And then the Au revoir Simone song, Sad Song is the name of it. It was cut from the return fully.
Yeah.
It's the only one on there that was shot, made, and then cut. It would have been the third song that they would have had in the series because Au revoir Simone also did Lark and A Violent Yet Flammable World. I said it both ways there. I think that's what I did. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm just going to go through the lyrics with you, because you now have heard it.
Yeah, because I can't escape this even after the return
Even after it's done. So I'm going to give you a lyric, and you're going to tell me what you think it means. Now that you have the whole entire return, because we don't know what part this would have been featured in. Play me a sad song.
No.
Because that's what I want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Play me a sad song, because that's what I want to hear.
Okay, really good. I like that.
Someone wants to hear something sad.
I want you to make me cry. I want to remember the places that we left, lost to the mists of time.
I want to cry.
I know that you'll go soon. You'll find out, so take me with you always. I know that you'll go soon.
Stuff sucks. Goodbye.
You'll find out, so take me with you always. On buses that move through the night, we sleep on and on. We got off at Memphis. Blacktop heat will make us thirsty. We'll never get sick anymore.
Shit sucks, but we'll try.
And that's the end of the song.
Honestly, the biggest part about this, if we had to associate beyond my memeing, beyond my jokes.
I wasn't joking. I was not memeing at all. That was entirely serious production.
It's very much a little hopeful note that I can see it either wedged or dealing with one of the two final parts.
I mean, here's the thing. It fits anywhere because...
It fits anywhere, but if we had to, think of, a sad departure...
Maybe not part 8. Maybe not that one, but...
But what I'm getting at is, a sad departure, that they're going onwards, everything will be okay with them together. The fact that, things don't end up together and things do not turn out okay is very notable.
But also, there were songs about that since the very beginning.
There was.
They've been sprinkled throughout. Almost every song in the Roadhouse has dealt with, time or dreams and people... feeling as though everything's slipping away from them, and especially a sense of can we go back? Or I miss you. Is there some way we can make this work, or is it all going away?
But this one seems to be very self-inflicted. It seems that they are walking towards that conclusion with knowledge that this conclusion is likely to be reached, which I do think the steady march onwards to maybe try to help someone out. There still has to be some recognition of what's to come, especially coming off of Diane's character.
Well, and I would think, so the last part did not have a Roadhouse episode.
No.
And I don't think it should.
It should not.
I do not want it to have a Roadhouse feature.
Nope.
So it's possible it was meant for that and then cut. They knew they had 18 parts, so they requested 18 songs. That's possible. Other thing is that it could have been there, and then they actually got a music act that replaced it where they didn't know if they were going to get that artist.
Yeah.
So, if it was part 17, I think that's the one that Julie Cruz performed in.
Mm-hmm.
And I am very grateful that Julie Cruz was able to do that performance.
Same thing here.
So I think no matter what happened, even though it is called Sad Song, I am not sad that it got cut, because Au revoir Simone already got 2 features in the show. And I think that it's great. It's preserved for those who want it on the special features.
Au revoir, sad song.
With that note, I have a wonderful and strange question of the week for you, Professor, and I will admit I've said this one to you off-pod prior. I am losing my ability to speak. I'm glad we're wrapping this one up here. So my question for you is, if you got to bring one musical act to the Roadhouse, and it gets filmed and shot and recorded just the way that any other performance is, it doesn't have to replace anything, it's just getting the proper treatment. If you could feature a band or act in the Roadhouse, what music act would you want featured?
I think that I want a song that not only is tonally different, just because I think that there's all sorts of varieties of sound that come out of the Roadhouse. So I want to try to get something that's a little bit different from what I experienced from them, but still sort of keep that longing idea that seems to be prevalent through most of the music. I think that one act that could be a lot of fun, especially visually, would probably be Steam Powered Giraffe with their song Honeybee, where there's tone sounds. You can, of course, listen to the song yourself, but there's just a hello, goodbye, 'twas nice to know how I find myself without you, that I'll never know. I let myself go. That's kind of the tone of the song. This is
about
itself.
Dougie dealing with his rapid weight gain, singing it to Jade, clearly.
Hello, goodbye, I'm rather crazy, and I never thought I was crazy. It's something that...
Still could be Dougie.
It could still be Dougie. It's something that, like, the sound of it gives off, like, a levity yet melancholy that lyrically I think can match up with different tones and points of the music that is provided. And plus, they are very much performers that visually are striking just because they dress up as automatons and move and react in such a fashion. I think that you get some very fun shots with that.
Okay. For myself, I would immediately answer Shoo Shoo. If you're not familiar, I believe I'm saying their name correctly. It's XIU, Shoo Shoo. And they did a cover album of Shoo Shoo Plays the Music of Twin Peaks. And if you haven't checked that out and you have a tolerance for like heavier, more noisy kind of takes on music, it is a sometimes harrowing mix of instrumentals that kind of lean into the darkness and oppressive doom Twin Peaks can go into, with occasionally outside the instrumental parts, the vocals coming in. And the vocal quality of the singer from Shoo Shoo is really hard to describe. It is a very deep and pained sort of voice. I don't know specifically which part I would want it to be in, but I think that any song pretty much that Shoo Shoo's made that I've ever heard, I'm not saying they have to literally do a cover song of Twin Peaks music in the town. They could, but I think just in general, Shoo Shoo, their musical catalog has songs that just have such wrenching lyrics that to be able to perform them, I just think would be a great nod to the fact that Shoo Shoo had recognized Twin Peaks in a very cool way in the past.
Yes.
Twin Peaks, I scratch your back, you scratch mine. I thought Shoo Shoo should have been there. That's how I feel about the subject. So next time on Twin Peaks Wonderful and Strange Logcast, we're talking about the Final Dossier, the last and most recently released work from Twin Peaks, official material. And once we dive into that, we're done.
Except for a curtain call.
Well, I'm done with Twin Peaks, the original material. There's always been
still material in the curtain call. It's still there.
So we're talking about the entire book. If you want to join us for that and be completely caught up to date, you got like a week to read this thing. Or you could just listen to our episode later. I won't be offended. That's cool. It's short notice for you. It's short notice. Hey, you said the audio was like less than 3 hours. If you do like
2 hours and 53 minutes on Audible's audiobook.
Yeah, that's shorter than some of our episodes.
Don't say that.
It's true, though.
Don't say that.
Why? It's the truth. I think our audience deserves to know the truth.
I don't deserve to know the truth.
And I'm okay with that.